This is a response to PPSimmons' video The Living Dinosaur Runs from Debate Offer from PPSimmons, Scared or Unable to Defend Himself. As I've mentioned elsewhere, I've become a little disillusioned with the YouTube atheism scene of late, and have been questioning the value of the considerable time and effort expended in the production of my videos. In the midst of my ennui, however, I received a curt message from the PPSimmons channel inviting me to debate that shining paragon of Christian virtue, Shock of God. Upon declining this attractive opportunity for a number of reasons that should be immediately obvious to those whose intellects haven't been dulled by the anoxic conditions brains tend to encounter when the heads harbouring them spend inordinate amounts of time lodged inside digestive tracts, my would-be adversaries somewhat predictably took the opportunity to claim victory as if they'd won first prize in a witch-burning contest. Unfortunately, it seems that while they were searching for a white feather as enthusiastically as a preacher rummaging through a bucket of tits, they neglected to pay attention to the video they were making to label me as a coward. As a result, they've afforded me a fine opportunity to make what might be my last hurrah, so with that said, let's take a look at what they had to say and whether I've managed to save the best till last.
Hello everyone, Mike Shoesmith here.
Now I must apologise here because when I made Holy Hallucinations 30 I was unaware of your real name and so christened you with a respectful sobriquet of my own concoction. Unfortunately, although I'm now a little wiser, it's rather futile to lock the stable door after the horse has bolted, and since I feel my little nickname is infinitely more appropriate for the purposes of this video, I shall continue referring to you as Pisspants.
As many of you know, we recently interviewed Shock of God. His name is Rich.
Well, I have to say ditto here and stick to my original and much more accurately descriptive moniker of Cockshite. I must confess, though, to some amusement at the irony of finding out his name is Richard, because he is, without a doubt, one of the biggest dicks on this website, if not the planet.
And a great guy, and a wonderful, powerful man of God.
Hey, steady on, Pisspants. It's obvious that you're surprisingly fond of your special friend, but this is a family channel and I'm afraid we're not interested in hearing what or whom Cockshite is doing.
The exploits prophesied in the Bible, reaching out to the atheist community because he was an atheist.
Yeah, right, an atheist. I'm not sure if you actually believe this, Pisspants, but considering how stupid past evidence indicates you are, it's certainly not beyond the bounds of possibility. However, for people capable of bridging a synapse occasionally, it's quite obvious that Cockshite's claim in this regard is, well, a crock of shite. Because anyone who has even the vaguest inkling of what atheism actually is wouldn't even dream to ask his stunningly banal, accurate and correct question, because they would realise what a quite spectacular arse they were making of themselves in doing so.
And essentially, he's a laborer in the arena of ideas.
You crazy creationist, Pisspants. You might be as dumb as a Great Dane with his nose up a Shih Tzu's arse, but at least you're entertaining. Anyway, I'll let you get on with your video while I wring out my underpants.
Now, the Living Dinosaur has made videos about PPSimmons, and we have been asked rather to debate him, to look at his videos and to refute them. So I did that. I went to his channel and I looked into some of his material, but it was so foul, so full of gratuitous foul language that there was nothing usable there for me. I just couldn't use any of it.
I have to say, Pisspants, that this clip brought to mind Lyndon Johnson's immortal observation vis-a-vis Gerald Ford, that is, that he was so dumb he couldn't fart and chew gum at the same time. And while I can't be sure whether you managed to squeeze one off just then, it certainly suggested that you're so dumb you can't operate a computer and talk at the same time. As a result, you may notice yourself sounding unusually eloquent in parts of this video, because I've taken the liberty to edit out the silences that punctuate your abominably dreary monologue like respites in a particularly vicious case of amoebic dysentery. I did this because even my creative talents would be stretched to animate the copious silences induced by the squealing and crunching of the stripped gears in your dilapidated mind. Anyway, getting back to the point, I included this clip because it's particularly pertinent to something you say later, and you can rest assured that I'll be inserting it rectally at the appropriate juncture. I'll let you know when to drop them and bend over, piss pants, but in the meantime allow me to throw in my 2 cents with regard to what you said about my creative use of Anglo-Saxon vernacular. You see, call me cynical if you like, but your protestations as to your inability to respond to my verbal rapings because of your delicate oral sensibilities is, unfortunately, indistinguishable from the same inability being actuated by a tiny and shriveled brain that's simply incapable of responding to the refutations I've been regularly inserting roughly into you and your Bible buddies' collective ani. The likelihood of this interpretation is bolstered by the fact that even Ian Juby somehow managed to scrape together the acumen to find a way to obviate my invective and respond to me, though it is of course entirely possible that even this lies beyond your abilities because you're even stupider than that epsilon-minus lobotomized walrus. I have my suspicions as to which explanation is the closer reflection of reality, and since you're evidently not the sharpest nail in the cross, I'll give you a clue. It's not yours, dipshit.
But I didn't want to ignore the challenge, so I said to Rich of Shock of God, I said, would you be willing to do that with me as moderator? He's pretty foul, I said. And then Rich said, it's not a problem. We pre-record it, and then we bleep out all of his foul language.
And here we go with the first reason I decided to decline your generous proposal, piss pants. Right from the outset, you were already admitting that you intended to censor me. Now, I realize that you were solely referring to my linguistic licentiousness in this case, but unfortunately I have no way of knowing whether you'd restrict your bowdlerization to my irreverence rather than my arguments. After all, even a drooling simpleton like you could use an audio processor to turn a recording of me fucking cockshite viciously up the arse with his arguments into one of him converting me to Christianity while persuading me to piss over a copy of the God Delusion. And while I might be able to mitigate this eventuality by putting up the full recording on my channel, I'd be powerless to stop you from misleading the poor gullible sheep you're deceiving on yours, who are, I suspect, the primary target of this scheme. Now, my guess is that you'd protest and claim that this was not your intent and that even a perfidious little weasel like you wouldn't dream of stooping so low. Sadly, this would necessitate me having to trust you, and since trust is a commodity that isn't given away freely and needs to be earned, this would pose a perplexing conundrum. Because based on your prior behaviour and that which I'll be demonstrating here shortly, I'm afraid that the balance of your and Cockshite's account in this respect is further in the red than the Greek economy.
So I sent the living dinosaur a message, a private message.
And I'd like to point out the fact that you are actually able to PM me and that I couldn't be afforded the same courtesy as I've been blocked by you. Now you're going to give us your flaccid excuses as to why you've done so later, and at that juncture I shall be administering them an industrial-strength dose of Viagra and then using them to sodomize you as roughly as possible. In the meantime, I'll point out that mine is the channel that allows all criticisms, no matter how harsh, disagreeable or vile, while yours treats any dissenting comments, no matter how polite, reasonable or level-headed, in the same way the Vatican treats evidence in a child abuse investigation.
Okay. We sent that out on the 28th of December. Today is the 17th, so 19 days ago we sent this message. So for 19 days, this is what we heard from him. That's a cricket. I brought up a cricket on YouTube and somebody recorded it.
Okay, piss pants. Remember when I mentioned that I'd be conducting a proctological procedure on you with something you said earlier? Well, it's time for your appointment. While you're dropping your strides and assuming the position, I'll take a moment to point out my amusement that you felt it necessary not only here but twice elsewhere in your video to point out what that sound was and what it meant. From this, I can only assume that you and your fellow piss-panters think that your subscribers are just as stupid as you are. So with that said, I think it's time for me to get on to the point we've been waiting for, so I strongly suggest that you grit your teeth and brace yourself for re-entry. Remember when you said earlier that you waited 19 days for my response? Well, you seemed to think that this was a big deal because you mentioned it more than once in your video. Remember this?
But no, he stewed about it for 19 days.
It seems your fevered imagination was working overtime on this one, Pisspants, but considering the kinds of things it's convinced you to believe in, I suppose that's not too surprising. Unfortunately, it also seems that your severe cognitive dysfunction also rendered you unable to curtail your flights of fancy and didn't make you even pause for thought before committing your hallucination to video. You see, it may well have escaped your notice, but your little missive happened to arrive during the holiday season. This was particularly surprising because you claim to be a Christian and so might have been expected to notice its proximity to your holy day. But apparently you did not, because it didn't seem to occur to you that I might be enjoying my break with my family and may not have been inclined to drop everything to answer pointless messages from
a bunch of cunt weasels.
Furthermore, it presumably never occurred to you that the first couple of weeks of the new year might be a busy time catching up on work and getting back into the school season, and that I, like many others, might have been both indisposed and disinclined to leap to the beck and call of a jumped-up little cocksucker with delusions of his own importance. This oversight on your part may have come about because while I have a real job doing something that's of actual use to society and so can't spare all my time to deal with numbnuts like you, it appears that you're paid to do nothing but talk shit and lie to the gullible like a parasite sucking on society's scrotal sack and so can't imagine what real work is. So, Pisspants, it happens that I had a rather large backlog of PMs to attend to come mid-January, and yours was hardly at the top of the list. In fact, as it turned out, you were right at the bottom, just after the gentleman inviting me to check out the video of his Kajagoogoo cover and the one asking me to watch an infomercial for a miracle cock growth penicizer. But what's most amusing here, Pisspants, is not that you jumped onto this point as enthusiastically as a priest introducing himself to a freshman class of choir boys, but that you were evidently oblivious to how poorly doing so served you. Because apparently you're unaware that my first rebuttal to a PPSimmons video was way back in Holy Hallucinations 8, which was released on July 28, 2010. That's exactly 2 years and 5 months before you finally got round to responding to me, which even a hypocritical motherfucking speck of shit like you would have to admit is just a little longer than you were kept waiting. So with that in mind, Pisspants, I think by your own reasoning, if I was indeed stewing for those 19 days, you should be willing to admit that you and the other mentally atrophied primitives at the PPSimmons channel have been positively shitting your pants continuously for the past 29 months. Have you ever considered doing a sponsorship deal with Tide, I wonder?
And this was his response. Let's go up. Considering that you people and blankety blank have proven that you're not interested in debate by the way you run your channels, you have some nerve. Rather than providing you any opportunity to gain some credibility or dignity, I think I'll stick to ponying the blank out of you. Thanks. That was his response to us today.
I'm not going to play back our entire exchange here, but will for the record be leaving a link to it in the description. Instead, I play just my initial response in order to elaborate a little. You see, Pisspants, it's a matter of record that you and Cockshite are two of the most egregiously dishonest creationists here on YouTube, and considering the company you're in, that's saying something. Both of you are known to block users and censor comments at the drop of a hat, to refuse video responses and to lie for your god as if he rewards shitbaggery with blowjobs. This kind of behaviour tends to leave the impression that you're not interested in any kind of debate, but instead are intent on promoting yourselves and pushing your own agendas while shielding your subscribers from ever discovering how often and how viciously they've been rammed up your jacksies by countless able YouTubers in the past. Thus, when a pair of massive tits like you send a request to debate, it's immediately clear to anyone who isn't suffering from your kind of neurofecal disability that a discussion is the last thing you're interested in. Instead, a much more likely inference is that your agenda is to take the opportunity of a biased debate format to lie like Kent Hovind with a pencil in one hand and a tax return in the other, and then claim victory regardless of what was said, safe in the knowledge that if your asses were handed to you on a plate, your subscribers would never know better. Thus, it seemed to me that the safest response was not to dignify your request with an affirmative, but instead to restrict myself to doing the only thing that people like you most deserve, and that's humiliating you as soundly as I possibly can. Of course, when I declined your disingenuous offer, I was more than aware that you'd most likely grab the opportunity to accuse me of cowardice as eagerly as Venomfang X snatching a $1 bill from a leukemia patient, but I also hoped that this might provide me with some material with which to highlight your dishonesty. As you know, Pisspants, I'm not a religious man, but if I were, your response would have convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that my prayers had been answered.
Now, he says that we have the opportunity to gain some credibility. However, he has less than 20,000 subscribers and only 1.5 million viewers. We have 24,146 subscribers, 27.5 million views. So this would be a boon to him, not to us, right? And Shock, he has 23,000 subscribers and almost as many views. So this would be a lift up for him.
Well, Pisspants, I do have to admit that I find the fact that a pair of mentally subnormal and morally bankrupt shitbags like you two have more subscribers than I and many other rationalist channels just a little depressing, and this certainly doesn't help in alleviating my current video-making malaise. But other than reminding me of the shabby state of the so-called community on this site, I'm afraid the only thing this argument did was show that when it comes to the unforgiving battleground of ideas, you've turned up wearing just a diaper and swinging a rattle while foolishly expecting to leave with your testicles and dignity intact. That's because, Pisspants, it seems that you're unaware that sub count and total video views are not the only metrics of channel success. The fact that realizing this would only have taken a moment's investigation and just a tiny soupçon of thought suggests that you're either too lazy or uninterested to do the work to determine whether the thoughts your brain is excreting have any merit, or that you lack the requisite number of functional neurons to perform the necessary evaluations. If you had investigated further, you might have realized how easy it would have been for me to fuck you brutally with your own malformed thought, but since you didn't, allow me to do the work for you. You see, it doesn't take a genius to discover that your stats are obscuring the bigger picture once you notice that the average views on my videos are just a tad higher than those on yours. In fact, with just a small amount of extra effort, you could have taken the 68 videos from my channel and compared them to, say, the last 68 malodorous offerings from yours, and discovered that while my videos average a potent and virile 17,000 views each, yours trail pathetically behind with a limp and flaccid 6,400. And if you think that's bad, Pisspants, watch what happens when we look at our medians. Mine drops slightly to 16,000, indicating a fairly tight distribution around the mean, while yours drops like a preacher's pants in a whorehouse to just a hair over 1,000. The reason for this discrepancy rapidly becomes obvious after just the most perfunctory of investigations. You see, the only thing inflating your views are your vile, repugnant, and frankly borderline treasonous videos against your own president. In fact, looking through your videos by order of popularity, it becomes clear that the primary reason your total views are in the millions is because of your dishonorable and repulsive slanders against President Obama and the hordes of racist mental defectives that they attract. But when it comes to your anti-science and religious videos, Pisspants, it seems that mine average about 16 times more views than yours. It doesn't take a genius to work out why, of course, but since I realize that you're a few standard deviations to the left of the average, I'll give you a clue. In fact, I'll also point out that this video that I'm responding to now has double the views of most of your regular offerings after I pointed out its existence in the description of a recent shout-out I gave. So when all's said and done, Pisspants, it should now be quite clear who'd be the true beneficiary of any publicity arising from such a debate. It wouldn't have been me, it would have been yourself and Cockshite, whose channel stats are every bit as impotent as yours. Now I suggest you pull up your diapers and pick up your balls while I play the next clip.
If he could take on Shock and destroy him in a debate, I would have moderated it fairly there's no way for him to lose, really, unless he can't debate, unless he just hides behind his moniker and his filthy language and his cartoony channel. And that's essentially what he's doing here.
And here's another problem with your offer that you're apparently oblivious to, Pisspants. I suppose you weren't paying much attention during the election, presumably because you'd already decided that nothing was going to change your mind about not supporting a Kenyan nignog. But anyone who watched the presidential race will understand that debates have nothing to do with finding out who has the stronger position, but rather who has the most experience and can lie the most convincingly. The latter point would put me at a particular disadvantage because I don't lie. Not only is this because, unlike you, I actually have some character, but also because one tends not to have to when one has the facts on one side. People like you and Cockshite, on the other hand, who have the moral turpitude of a tea partier walking past a breadline and no facts whatsoever, have to resort to spewing lies like a busted sewer line. So it's rather telling that you place so much weight on the debate format, Pisspants, and seem to think that if I weren't a good debater that this would somehow mean that my position was invalid. I'm convinced that vermin like you prefer this format because there's little or no chance for your opponents to fact-check your bullshit, nor to demand that you supply evidence for your ludicrous assertions. And that, of course, works perfectly for underhanded fuckwits who have no facts to offer.
The reason he was blocked, the reason he was kicked out, essentially, is because he's so foul. I mean, the kind of language he uses, we don't permit people to come into our living rooms and sit down and use that kind of language in front of us and our wives and children. And we treat our YouTube channel like it's our home. So if you're going to come in and disrespect us, be rude to us, use that kind of language around us, you're gone.
Okay, Pisspants. I hope you didn't spend too long gluing your knackers back on because those babies are coming off again in the next few minutes. You see, the analogy you drew made it sound like you're sitting quietly in your living room and then being forced to fend off hordes of home invaders like the paragon of virtue you are. However, a more accurate description of what you're really doing is leaning out of your window and shouting disgusting insults at random passers-by, and then cravenly refusing to open the door when they demand to be let in to give you the damn good kicking you so sorely deserve. Because make no mistake, Pisspants, the things you say about atheists and the lies you try and smear over the work of the people responsible for you not living in a hovel subsisting on a diet of rotten turnips and rat shit are every bit as vile and disgusting as anything I've ever said. So the only difference between us when it comes to manners is our choice in vocabulary, and since I've been demonstrably and consistently more intellectually honest and honourable than you've ever been, and all I've ever done is respond to shitbaggery initiated by you, I contend that this makes you twice the arsehole I am and more. In addition, your claim that I've been excluded from your parlour because of my earthy lexicon also falls rather short, since I now have quite a collection of testimonies from users who've been blocked or had comments rejected or removed not because of any bad language, but merely for having the gall to disagree with you. In addition, I've included in the description links to 2 videos by Atheism TV, providing videographic documentation of both you and Cockshite blocking them out of hand for merely asking a polite question that might have made you feel uncomfortable. I should add that since I didn't make much effort to gather this evidence, I contend that it's just the very tip of a gigantic iceberg floating on the ocean of shit that your channel has produced over the years. Of particular note on this list is the Christian user TrustinJC, who's explained in both written and video form how he's not only been blocked by both you and Cockshite, but how you personally, Pisspants, tried to badger him into retracting his unfavourable review of Pastor Bollocks's book on Amazon. Yet another example of your fine, upstanding Christian behaviour, no doubt. And funnily enough, I also later discovered that a comment of his on one of my videos that included an exposition of your abject dishonesty in the Amazon incident was mysteriously the only one to have been marked as spam. Quite the coincidence, don't you think? Now, I've seen you backpedaling on this blatant lie regarding your censorship policies on your comments page, where you're now claiming that your gagging isn't restricted just to obscenity, but to anything that you would not accept in your home. Well, again, based on my testimonies, it seems that disagreeing with you in any way whatsoever falls into this category. That in itself, of course, would be fine if you had the decency to admit that that's what you're doing. That is, blanket censorship of all dissenting voices. But instead you try and justify your cravenness by hiding behind your weasel words and ignoring the fact that you're the fuckers who started hurling your disgusting assertions into the public forum from the safety of your filthy hovel. So while you're free to behave in this despicable manner, Pisspants, while you're free to sling your shit around the internet like a chimp in a cage and then act horrified when some of it gets slung back, while you're free to cower behind your censorship and hide the weaknesses in your pitiful arguments from your subscribers, do be aware of the consequence. That being that no one outside your cadre of sycophantic self-affirming cretins takes you, your arguments or your pathetic challenges seriously, because your behaviour makes you about as credible as a priest who can't wash the cum stains out of his cassock.
And besides, using that kind of language, I tell my children this all the time. If you're using that kind of language is the leading indicator of a lesser intellect. So if you can't use proper intellectual language, then you're not welcome on our channel.
You really are a spectacularly stupid man, aren't you, Pisspants? I swear that if someone told you that nut sweat cured erectile dysfunction, that you'd be signing yourself up for yoga classes in a heartbeat. And considering what I'm sure you're teaching your poor educationally bereft children about modern science, this freshly crimped off erroneous turd is but a drop in the ocean. To elaborate, I've already demonstrated what a pile of shit your prudish remonstrations amount to, but the point of this clip was to show you resorting to that old stalwart of the fuckwit who's utterly incapable of responding to an intellectual superior, that being the people who swear are dumb defense. Unfortunately for you, though, you made an error so large here that since I'm in possession of your nads from the last segment, I shall now proceed to stuff them so far up your bunghole that you'll be tasting them every time you burp. Because coming from the person who claims that I'm the one who can't use proper intellectual language, it's priceless that shortly afterwards you also said this about me.
In fact, schoolgirls have probably got more bravado than this person.
I can only assume that you have no idea what bravado means, do you, Pisspants? Because the last time I looked, Webster's defined it as blustering, swaggering conduct or a pretense to bravery. Thus, in effect, what you said here is that a schoolgirl is able to talk smack better than I. And while that may or may not be the case, I think it's safe to say that your intent was to cast aspersions on my valour, in which case the word you were looking for and yet failing dismally to find was courage. Or bravery, or fearlessness, or doughtiness. So if you think profanity is a unique indicator of a lesser intellect, Pisspants, what do you think your abysmal grasp of the English language means? Again, since I know that thinking isn't your strong suit, I'll give you a clue. You're a moron, dipshit.
We were not ignoring the challenge. We offered the debate to him, a real debate, with guidelines and rules and so on. But he refuses. He runs away like a coward, like a little schoolgirl.
Well, Pisspants, aside from the fact that you managed to not ignore the challenge for 2.5 years, I think I've clearly demonstrated why the debate you were offering was as laughable as your pretensions to intellectualism. Furthermore, seeing as how even your definitions for your censorship guidelines during this whole sorry incident were as elastic as Kent Hovine's anal sphincter, I think it's pretty clear that the rules you would have enforced as an impartial moderator would have essentially amounted to anything you fucking felt like. And if you want to protest that, if you want to maintain that you're a decent Christian and that you would never behave in such a despicably dishonest manner, then I suggest you take some time to reflect on your demonstrated public behaviour to date, because from your track record it's evident that you can be trusted about as much as a priest in a confessional with a choir boy. And if any of your subscribers happen to be watching this, I would recommend that they spare a moment to take an honest and open-minded look at that record, because if you do, you'll discover that all people like Pisspants and Cockshite are doing is making all Christians erroneously look like a bunch of disingenuous, dishonest, dishonourable, disgusting douchebags. Hello everyone. As part of this whole incident, I was contacted by Shock of God, and he asked me to mention that he would love to see any atheist join him for discussions at his chat room at shockornow.net. He says he's, and I quote, extremely tolerant to my atheist friends there, and he would welcome you all. While I can't confirm or deny the veracity of this claim, I did say I'd pass on the message, and since I'm a man of my word, there it is. Also, I'm taking what may well be an extended sabbatical from making videos to both recharge my batteries and try to recover my lost enthusiasm. While I can't promise I'll get back to it, I will make every effort to do so, but in any case I'll still be posting shoutouts and still be around in the comment sections of others' videos. In the meantime, if you're wondering what you're going to do to replace your regular dose of brutal ponage, might I suggest you head over and subscribe to the channel of the spectacular Snake Plisskenist. This gentleman is obviously well versed in the sciences and uses his knowledge to disabuse not only creationists but all manner of delusional numbnuts in all manner of amusing ways. If you like to watch facts being inserted violently into well-deserving recta, you can't go wrong with this channel. Finally, Anti-Citizen X, an incredibly talented video maker that you should all be subscribed to, made an excellent suggestion to me that I counter Pisspants' offer with a more equitable one of my own. As a result, I've included terms for an unbiased video exchange-based debate with either he or Cockshite in the description. Should either decide to try their luck in a situation where facts are more important than rhetoric, and where they'll be expected to back up assertions with evidence, then I'll be happy to put my hiatus on hold. Feel free to pass on the message to either defective, as I've been blocked by both channels. As always, thanks for your support, and until hopefully next time, all the best and take care.